Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter. I am Bryson Carver, and this is the only place where you will find somebody with a Red Sox hat on, with a Dak Prescott hat on, with a Dallas Cowboys shirt on. It's the only place you're going to find that. Okay, we're really unique here at Carving It Up in a good way, and we got a lot to talk about. I mean, again, October is the month of crazy in the world of sports. You got WNBA Finals just concluded. I'll discuss Candace Parker a little later in the show. You got baseball playoffs. My Red Sox play Game 3 tonight. They tied the Houston Astros in Game 2 with an offensive explosion once again. You've got the Braves got a 2-0 lead on the Dodgers for the second straight year in the NLCS. And, of course, we got a lot of football to talk about. I'll briefly discuss my Tennessee Vols. And I feel ashamed calling them my Tennessee Vols, especially considering the nauseating fan base. But I'll get to that later in the show. But NFL topics, obviously going to talk about the Steelers' win over the Seahawks last night. Why, to be completely honest, wasn't that impressed. As well as the Packers win over the Bears. You got the Cardinals dominating the Browns. I had Cardinals winning. I didn't see a 23-point smackdown. I mean, it was crazy. You had Lamar Jackson who balled out yesterday, completely outplayed Justin Herbert. I'll talk about that a little later in the show, as well as other NFL games. And at the end of the show, we'll predict Bills, Titans, really good Monday night game between two teams that we anticipate will probably be in the playoffs. But first, to begin the show, I do have a question for everybody, but I'm not going to ask it. I'm going to let Jimmy Johnson ask it.
How about them Cowboys? Yeah!
Insane game last night. Dallas Cowboys, New England Patriots. I had Dallas winning that game yesterday by a couple of touchdowns because I'm like, look, actually, let me take off my Red Sox hat for a second. Set that off to the side until the game tonight. But anyways, Cowboys, I figure, listen, nobody can stop them offensively. Even that great Patriots defense, which I'll get into later in this segment. The Patriots struggle against the Texans, right? They almost beat Tampa, but it was bad weather conditions. It was the emotions of Brady coming back. They choked a game, or better put, Damian Harris choked a game against Miami. And so this was really New England's opportunity to say, hey, we're not going anywhere. We're going to make a run, probably not the division because Buffalo's on another level, but we can make a run at the wild card game. Dallas didn't run the ball particularly well. Zeke was okay. Tony Pollard had his moments. Ladies and gentlemen, Dak Prescott showed up. Dak Prescott yesterday did a lot of great things. But before I get into him, let's just go over the crazy sequence of events that we saw throughout the game. So first you had this.
Quick throw, and it's intercepted. He's got another one, and he's got a field ahead of him. Diggs is going to take it to the end zone. Unbelievable.
Trayvon Diggs had me going nuts in my living room watching this game with his 7th interception in 6 games. It's insane what this guy is doing. Mac Jones said, I'm going to go at Trayvon Diggs before the game, and Trayvon said, thank you very much. And a play after it.
Oh, somehow they blew the coverage. It's Bourne to the end zone. One play later, the Patriots strike magic.
At that point, I pretty much collapsed in my living room. But I hear a lot of people saying this. And look, I'll give Mac Jones this. Because y'all know I've been a critic of Mac. Probably the best game he's played this season. I mean, people were raving about how great he played against Tampa. I was like, I don't know what y'all are talking about. It's just little dump-off passes. A lot of quarterbacks could do that. He didn't play particularly well against Houston or against, the Jets, or definitely against the Saints. That was his worst game. I was like, I don't see it. Yesterday, I didn't see it the way I saw it, say, from Trevor Lawrence yesterday against the Miami Dolphins. That was great. He made some nice throws. But people are talking about today that throw, because we didn't show the full play, but he made that, throw to Kendrick Bourne, and Kendrick Bourne took it 75 yards to the house. Obviously, Bourne beat Diggs on a double move. Diggs is trying to make another play, right? A lot of it is great anticipation on the part of Trayvon Diggs. I mean, he was a former receiver. You hear the story that he told that he called his brother Stephon Diggs, who's one of the 3 best receivers in football for all I'm concerned, and called him crying because Nick Saban transitioned him from a receiver to a corner. And Stephon said, embrace it. And boy, has Trayvon embraced that. He was really good at Alabama, and he has been a second-round steal for the Dallas Cowboys without a question. He's up. TJ Watt's got an argument, but without a question, the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year. He's been outstanding. But Mac Jones did not make a good throw there. Let's make sure we're clear about that. Bourne beats Diggs on the spin move. I don't know what Devontae Casey is doing. Casey's trying to get him a second interception. He takes a terrible angle. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of Bucky Brooks, who is a scout who watches film for a living. I'll put up his tweet right now. I'll read it for the podcast audience. He said, quote, any deep ball thrown inside the numbers should be on the free safety. Diggs' play with outside leverage made a speed turn that forced the wide receiver to stay inside. If the free safety, which was Devontae Casey, by the way, can judge the ball, he walks into an easy pick because Jones stares down the throw. That's a high school play. It's that simple. That was more of a bad play by KZ than a great throw from Mac Jones. So I don't want to hear, oh, wow, he went right back to Trayvon Diggs. It was a stupid decision. It was a stubborn decision. It was a rookie decision. According to Bucky Brooks, it was a high school decision. So I don't want to hear about that. And then, of course, Dallas gets the ball. Penalties kill them. They get to a 3rd and 25, and I'm thinking, oh, our goose is cooked. And Dak Prescott did what Dak Prescott always does, and that's come in the clutch. 24-yard throw, almost gets the first down. 24-yard throw to CeeDee Lamb, who certainly we'll get to in just a second. And then, of course, Greg Zuerlein giving me a heart attack per usual. I didn't even watch this.
Kick by Zuerlein. Will it hook? It's good.
I was not watching the kick. I was asking my dad to tell me exactly what was happening, and Jim Nantz as well. And then you get to overtime. Dallas calls tails, which Randy Moss once said, you always call heads. And for some reason or another, I know Seattle actually called tails and won the toss last night in the Sunday night game, which I'll get into later in the show. But you always call heads. Dallas called tails. New England won the toss. Dallas' defense got a stop, although Anthony Brown got away with a hands to the face. But, thank you, officials, for that break. That happens throughout the game. But then, a few plays later, this is how Dallas went home.
Nice. You're right. Throws it down the field. It's caught at the 10, and this game is over. The Cowboys win it.
It was so fun because Dallas wanted to run that play, and Tony Romo pointed that out about 5 plays prior that they were going to run that play, and then Dallas used another timeout. And so before I'll get into coaching later, let's talk about Dak Prescott. Y'all know I've been a Dak Prescott fan, right? Yeah, I mean, y'all know that. I mean, I'm wearing his hat. I wear his hat 75, 80% of the shows. I believed in Dak Prescott before he was a Dallas Cowboy. I was jumping for joy. God is my witness when the Cowboys took him in the 4th round back in 2016. Now, in his rookie year, he exceeded even my expectations. But I've beat this table for 2 years now, 2 years, 3 days from now, of carving it up. This is not only a franchise quarterback. We determined that years ago. This is an elite quarterback. And I even apologized after I came home from Tampa, getting the great opportunity to watch the season opener. I apologized to Dak Prescott for saying before the season that I thought he was the 6th best quarterback in the league. I said, I'm sorry, Dak. You're in the top 5. You might even be 4. Well, Drew Brees last night on NBC, y'all know Drew Brees, right? He was a pretty good quarterback. I mean, all he did was, at the time he retired, he held the all-time NFL record for passing yards, but that doesn't mean anything. What does he know? But Drew Brees said last night that Dak Prescott, he went a step further than I would. He said Dak Prescott is a top 3 quarterback in the National Football League. And he's got an argument. Listen to these stats on the part of Dak. Dak Prescott's now tied with Drew Brees. Ironic that we just quoted Drew Brees for the most games in NFL history with 440 passing yards and 3 touchdown passes. He's done that 5 times. Again, Drew Brees played for 20 years. Dak Prescott's in year 6, and he's already tied Drew Brees for that impressive mark. The highest passer rating in NFL history when the game is tied in the 4th quarter or overtime, Dak Prescott leads all quarterbacks in the history of the NFL over Rich Gannon, Vinny Testaverde, Andrew Luck, and Aaron Rodgers. So passer rating with the game tied in the 4th quarter overtime, Dak Prescott is first all time. If you want to know the number, it's 148.3. So near perfect. He also tied Hall of Famer Dan Marino, he was good, for the most 400-plus passing yard games in their first 6 seasons, 9, by the way, since 1950. All other quarterbacks in NFL history have 9 such games combined. Dak Prescott is the 7th quarterback in the Super Bowl era to have 16 touchdown passes, a 70% completion percentage, and fewer than 5 picks in his team's first 6 games of a season. 4 of the previous 5 who did that won the MVP that season. Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Kurt Warner. And lastly, and this is mind-boggling, since 1994, Dak Prescott is the only NFL quarterback to have never thrown forget interception, incompletion in overtime. So in the overtime period, Dak Prescott has never thrown an incomplete pass. 18 for 18, 214 yards, 3 touchdowns with a passer rating of 155.8. So when people are freaking out, oh my God, Drew Brees, he's the prisoner of the moment. Is it? Or has the product in the field kind of proven what I've said for 2 years? Dak Prescott is without question. This is why I fought for him constantly. Jerry Jones, give the man his money. Jerry finally caved. Dak got pretty much everything he wanted in the deal, although Jerry, was able to restructure the contract to his credit. That made, Dak was able to get his money and was still somewhat team friendly, which is seemingly impossible. But, Jerry and the capologist in Dallas did a great job. But this is why I said, Dallas, I don't care how much talent you have. I don't care what your circumstances are. You're not going anywhere without number 4. Nowhere. Previous Cowboys teams lose that game because they would have pretty much collapsed after Zuerlein had missed the previous field goal, which kept New England up by 1. Okay, well, Trayvon Diggs answers with the pick 6. New England answers with the touchdown following on the very next play. After that, Dallas teams would have just crumbled. But Dak Prescott converted a 4th and 4 when Cedric Wilson, to his credit, made a great catch on. Great adjustment. And Dak converted on a 3rd and 25, got 24 of those yards to put Dallas in field goal range. They tied the game, and they won the sucker in overtime. Now let me get to something I talked about 4 weeks ago after the Dallas Cowboys won on a game-winning field goal in overtime, ironically, against the Chargers. I said this is a Super Bowl contending team because they can run it. They didn't run it great. They weren't bad, but they didn't run it great last night, right? And Dak Prescott played out of his mind. But Dak's played great games where they've lost, and they've had games where they didn't run the ball particularly well, and they've won. Like it's happened. They've had games where the defense wasn't all that great, which the defense, it had its moments. I mean, obviously Randy Gregory had the big sack on Mac Jones that, Patriots up 14-7. They're driving again, and Randy Gregory had one of the huge plays in the game with the hit on Mac Jones, which forced a fumble, which Dallas recovered. That was a huge play. But defense had its moments, but then you were like, what are you doing? DeMonte KZ, you took that angle? Here's what can hold Dallas back. And I said it 4 weeks ago. Mike McCarthy. That's the only thing. That's it. That is the only thing that can hold the Dallas Cowboys back. As I mentioned, they've got the quarterback. That's not even debatable. Running game took a big step in the right direction this year. Receiving corps, one of the best in the league. By the way, good tight ends as well. Dalton Schultz has really emerged as a pretty reliable target for Dak, and Blake Jarwin in the red zone's good. The defense took a big step from last year. Coordinators, Kellen Moore is going to be a head coach next year. Crossing my fingers that Jerry comes to his senses and hires him. Dan Quinn has completely flipped the defense. John Bones Fossil, one of the best, if not the best, special teams coordinators in all football. They've got everything. They've got the roster and they've got the coaching staff. It's Mike McCarthy that worries me. Because I asked the question, I've asked this since day one, since game 1 of this season against Tampa Bay. What does Mike McCarthy do? Kellen Moore calls offensive plays. Dan Quinn runs the defense. Bones Fossil runs the special teams. What does he do? What does Mike McCarthy do? Heck, Dak Prescott has more say, or not more say, but has more, I guess, influence on coaching decisions than Mike McCarthy. Why? Because Dak Prescott and Kellen Moore are tied at the hip, right? I mean, they're really close, and they go over these plays, in practice and meetings. That's what I'm saying. Grady, by the way, says, I can see Dak maybe as a top 5, but unless you jump up like Pat Mahomes did, I need to see more. I respect what he's doing. I just need to see more, though. Asking who the 3 best quarterback in football is different than the 3 quarterbacks having the most impressive season. Got to look at the overall body of work. I see your argument, Grady, but Dak's the only guy. He played okay. He wasn't great. He also wasn't bad against the Chargers in week 2. Dak's really one of the only quarterbacks this season that has not had a bad game. Tom Brady's one of them. He had an off game against the Rams, but he was fine. Aaron Rodgers had a bad game against the Saints, an awful game for that matter. Josh Allen had a bad game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Russell Wilson had a bad game against the Minnesota Vikings. So even the guys that I think are better than Dak, which are Brady and Russ, those are the only 2 guys I can say right now, yeah, they're better than Dak. Like Russell Wilson hasn't, since the Legion of Boom and Marshawn Lynch, he hasn't had the proper support in years in Seattle. That's why I think he needs to get his butt out of there. It's a mess over there. And I'll get to the Seahawks later. But what you've seen from Dak, this is the same roster, ladies and gentlemen, that was a train wreck when Dak went down. It was a mess. They won 4 games after he suffered that ankle injury. So that's the only concern I have for the Dallas Cowboys is Mike McCarthy. His time management, his clock management is atrocious. You know the old saying, you got one job? You got one job. If you need to hire somebody to be in your ear who pays attention to the clock and say, hey, Mike, use a timeout here. Or, hey, Mike, maybe go for it here. Do that. Because this is what's going to get the Cowboys beat against the likes of a Rams or a Tampa Bay if they were to rematch. Or, Arizona they play later in the season. Arizona is legit. Or Kansas City, which they play 5 weeks from now. So that's my only worry with the Dallas Cowboys. They're legit. I think they've shown that. Dak, by the way, did suffer a right calf strain after the game. He was in a boot, but he said he wasn't concerned. And, of course, the MRI results came in and said that it is a right calf strain, but he's good to go. Dak seemed in good spirits. He didn't seem to be, he was limping off the field quite clearly after the game, but not something to worry about. Cowboys picked up, if Dak were to suffer any sort of injury, perfect time to have it, right? Because you're going into the bye week. They don't play till 13 days from now on Halloween night against the Minnesota Vikings. So that should be an interesting one. But a great win by the Cowboys. And Dak Prescott is the man, and Mike McCarthy is not. Okay, let's talk about the Cardinals and the Browns, because this is one I had close. Because we get the news, Cliff Kingsbury's out, the head coach of the Cardinals. He's not going to be there because he tested positive for COVID, and by all accounts, he should be back by tomorrow. He's fully vaccinated, and so he should be out of quarantine tomorrow. So they're missing their coach, and they're on the road at Cleveland. That's not an easy place to play, especially a West Coast team, which Arizona is, going to a chilly. It's not cold yet; it's October, but a chilly destination in Cleveland, Ohio. You've got, the running game of the Browns, which Nick Chubb's out, but Kareem Hunt, he's still a beast, and Kareem unfortunately got hurt in that game. And the Arizona Cardinals put a complete beat down on the Cleveland Browns. Completely. And I think it's really interesting this season thus far. We've talked about the Browns as Super Bowl contenders. I said, look, I don't think they're going to win their division. I took Baltimore to win the AFC North before the season started. And, thus far they're doing so. Actually, Cincinnati is above Cleveland right now. But what's really interesting about the Browns, they've got the perfect roster. I mean, Nick Chubb's out. Your number one running back's out. Yeah, you can plug another running back in who'd be a starter like 25 other teams. I mean, Kareem Hunt's that good. You've got a great offensive line. Yeah, it's beat up, but they're really deep. Okay, Jarvis Landry's hurt. Well, you still got this guy named Odell Beckham Jr. You still got T. Higgins. You still got good receivers. Defense has shown me thus far this year that they're no joke outside of the game against the Chargers. Before I continue, Grady says, FY, congrats to your team for taking the title back of America's team from my Patriots. They made the argument for years with Brady that we were. Cowboys finally playing like it. Yeah, I mean, that's really the Patriots were America's team. I mean, heck, they were called the Patriots, or are they called the Patriots? They had America's quarterback, the best quarterback of all time in Tom Brady. But, Bill Belichick is what? 7 + 2 is Belichick's 9-13 post Brady. I mean, like I said, he's a defensive mastermind, but as far as being a head coach, he's average. I mean, he really is. But thank you, Grady, for that message and for those kind remarks. So back to Cleveland. I think it's really interesting. All 3 losses. Let me say it this way. All 3 wins for the Browns have been against quarterbacks that are inferior to Baker Mayfield. Tyrod Taylor / Davis Mills. No, neither of those guys is as good as Baker. Justin Fields, he's not as good as Baker. Kirk Cousins, maybe you could say they're on the same level, although Kirk Cousins is balling right now. But body of work, I don't trust Kirk. I don't frankly trust Baker, so you can kind of say equal footing. All 3 of the Browns' losses have come to quarterbacks that are, without a question, better than Baker Mayfield. Patrick Mahomes in week 1, Justin Herbert last week, and Kyler Murray yesterday. We all know this is a quarterback's league. You can put the perfect roster together, which the Browns really have. Give credit to their front office. They put together an excellent roster, and I think they've got their coach in Kevin Stefanski. But as I said, I went live with a good buddy of mine last night, big supporter of the show. Shouts to him. And I was saying, look, this is a quarterback's league. You can put the perfect roster together, but if you don't have that guy, there's only so far you can go. There's only so far you can go. I mean, Baker was making some awful throws yesterday against the Cardinals. Awful. Meanwhile, Kyler Murray was absolutely spectacular. 4 touchdown passes. I mean, he was unstoppable. In my view, MVP discussion, for the moment, Justin Herbert is, I wouldn't say in the outside looking in, but he certainly took a couple steps back after the Chargers lost to the Ravens. To me, it's 3 guys right now. They're at the very top. It's Lamar Jackson, it's Kyler Murray, it's Dak Prescott, and you can throw Tom Brady's name in there if you so choose, and I certainly wouldn't have no problem with that. Kyler Murray is playing unbelievable. He's out of his mind. And I think what's interesting about the Cleveland Browns, speaking of those 3 losses, Baker, as we all know, is playing for a contract. Like, he wants to get paid. I mean, 2018, Josh Allen got paid, and Lamar Jackson, we all know, he gonna get paid. Sam Darnold in that class, Baker's proven he's better than Sam Darnold. And certainly better than Josh Rosen, no question. But if you want to be that franchise guy that the front office can count on, that like, okay, that's our guy moving forward, you got to produce. And thus far this season, Baker simply has not done that. He hasn't. Look at the tape, look at the numbers, look at whatever you want. Baker Mayfield has not produced this season at all. And this is how long, Browns fans, help me out here. How long has it been since you've had a roster this good? For real. You've got superstars everywhere. Myles Garrett, my pick preseason to be Defensive Player of the Year. He's playing great. Offensive lineman, outstanding. Jarvis Landry, really good. Best running back duo in football, which, by the way, now is gone for the moment. I don't know if Nick Chubb will be back next week, but Kareem Hunt, I think the Browns might have placed him on IR, so he's going to be out for a few weeks. But you still got Nick Chubb. I mean, you got either or. You got, again, the best running back tandem in football. Odell Beckham Jr. is not exactly a bad guy to have on the outside. I think we can all agree on that. And when the front office sees Baker Mayfield on the same field as Justin Herbert, Like, ooh, wow, Justin's really good. And Mahomes, oh, dang, Mahomes, he is something else. And Kyler Murray, man, that kid is electric. When they see Baker next to these other guys and they're wanting to give Baker a contract, this is why I said on the show a few months ago, I've got no problem if the Cleveland Browns pay Baker Mayfield and make him their long-term franchise quarterback. No problem. If you give this guy in excess of $30 million, you're screwed. Because this is the perfect roster that the Cleveland Browns have. We all know, if you're going to give quarterbacks a lot of money, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, it's you got the guy, you got your guy, but there's only so much money you can hand out to everybody else. But you trust that those guys that you gave a lot of money to can make up for those losses. That's why you give them the money. And Baker's not good enough. I mean, Baker's not good enough to lift a roster like this when he's not paid big money. I mean, he's not. I mean, I think that's pretty clear what you see on tape. Grady says injuries to Kareem Hunt, Chris Carson just killing me in fantasy, man. Yeah, I'd say I got Kareem Hunt too, and I'm going to have to obviously bench him probably for Devin Singletary. Do you think they should bench Baker, though? No, I don't think they should bench Baker. I think he's a better option than Case Keenum. I think Case Keenum is a lesser version of he's a poor man's Baker Mayfield. But when it comes to the Browns, what are you going to do? Because, again, I will reiterate, to the Haslam family, if you give this guy the same money that the Bills gave Josh Allen, that the Cowboys gave Dak Prescott, you're done. You're back to being the same old Browns. 5-6 win team, below average, losing to Pittsburgh, who's going to get a new quarterback next year, and Baltimore, who's got Lamar Jackson, and Cincinnati, who's got Joe Burrow. Like, by next year, certainly if the Steelers get Aaron Rodgers, Baker's the worst quarterback in the division. You can't win a championship if you got the worst quarterback in the division. Like I talked about this with Derek Carr a couple weeks ago. Like, when the Raiders lost to the Chargers, and you see Derek Carr, who I think is really good, balled out yesterday. He was outstanding. But you see him on the same field as Justin Herbert, you're like, okay, yeah, there's levels to this. And I really like Derek Carr. I've defended him on this show. But if you're the Raiders and you've got the third best quarterback in your division, you can't win a championship. Mahomes is better than Derek Carr. Justin Herbert's better than Derek Carr. Same case here with the AFC North. As of today, Baker's the third best quarterback in his division. I think he's better than Big Ben right now. I do. Big Ben's done. Burrow's clearly better, and Lamar Jackson, without a shadow of a doubt, is better. So that's what I'm looking at. And so, Grady asks, is Joe Burrow a better quarterback than Baker? Absolutely. Put Baker in Cincinnati. Put Baker in Joe Burrow's position with a bad offensive line, good receivers. Jamar Chase has been... I never said Jamar Chase couldn't play because I thought he was going to be good, and that LSU connection was definitely going to work. My concern for Joe Burrow was that offensive line was shaky at best. So I would have went with Penei Sewell, who the Lions ended up taking, just to shore up that offensive line. But hey, if Burrow can make it through the year healthy, that is something you can continue to address. Because look, Burrow's on a rookie contract. You can pay for offensive linemen in free agency. Maybe you can make some trades here and there. Go after good ones in the draft. So look, that's interesting. Grady says it'd be fun seeing Baker in Detroit. I don't wish Detroit on anybody. I don't. Like, I feel bad for Jared Goff. Like, I'm not a Jared Goff fan at all, but I kind of feel bad for him. Because you see what Stafford's doing in LA, and you're like, man, the Lions wasted this guy for a decade. It's crazy. But the bottom line is, Baker's a good quarterback. Is he a franchise quarterback? I'm leaning more towards yes, maybe. And if you're a yes, maybe quarterback, I don't know how far you can really go. You can get to the playoffs without a doubt. Maybe you'll even win the division here or there if a couple breaks go your way. But winning a championship, when you're in the same conference with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, and you're in the same division with Lamar Jackson, and even put Joe Burrow in there, you're kind of handicapped. I mean, there's really only so much you can do. So that's my thoughts on Baker Mayfield. And Arizona, don't want to, shy away from giving them flowers. They're legit. I mean, they really are. They go. We were worried, like, they kind of one of those fraud 3-0 teams. Like, remember, it feels like a long time ago. The Broncos were 3-0. Now they're 500. And, the Raiders were 3-0. They're 4-2 now, but we don't necessarily look at them in the same light. They got a lot of other issues going on that we all know about that's not football related. But we were like, the Cardinals are one of those early season undefeated frauds. Oh, no. They went on the road to Los Angeles and crushed the Rams. And they went on the road to Cleveland and just physically manhandled the Browns. I mean, J.J. Watt had a big game. I mean, it was not even contest. I mean, Cleveland had one good play the whole game, and that was the Hail Mary before the end of the half. So that was interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the Steelers and the Seahawks for just a second, because that was really interesting. So it was a game I didn't anticipate being that entertaining. I mean, I had Steelers by 2. I had them 26-24, but I didn't see it being an amazing football game. Which, by the way, they won by 3. So Pittsburgh, Grady real quick says more likely Arizona goes undefeated or Detroit doesn't win a game because they forget to bite a kneecap. What's more likely, the Lions not winning a game or the Cardinals going undefeated? I would say the Lions not winning a game, to be honest with you. Because first of all, they're the last, Arizona's the last undefeated team, and the Lions are the last winless team left thus far. The only evidence I got to back my theory of that up, that it'd be more likely for the Lions to go 0-17, which is funny because they went 0-16 in 2008, I think it was. It's easier to lose than it is to win. I mean, the Cardinals, they still do play the Rams another time. They play the Packers next Thursday. That's going to be a tough one. They play, as I mentioned earlier, the Cowboys in the second to last week of the season. They'll get Seattle once Russell Wilson's healthy. So there's still some tough games for the Cardinals on their schedule, whereas the Lions are an incompetent franchise with an incompetent coach with an average quarterback and a below-average roster. So there's only so far they can go. So that's my thoughts. I think that would be more likely to happen than Arizona running the table, but that's just me. Seahawks Steelers, again, not a game I anticipated being that entertaining. I got to be honest with y'all, but I find myself kind of glued to the TV in the fourth quarter. Even with Russell Wilson out, which he will be for a few more weeks with that finger injury. Even with the Steelers team that with Big Ben looks, I've used this word a lot, but average. It was a very entertaining football game. Ironically, it was actually two teams that met in the Super Bowl about 15, 16 years ago. So there you go right there. But Geno Smith, I thought, played a pretty good game. Fairly efficient. Of course, he had the fumble at the end that Pittsburgh recovered, and they kicked the game-winning field goal. But it kind of made me sit back and think, it feels like the Steelers are almost wasting a season. And what I mean by that is you got Mike Tomlin, who's, just one of the best coaches in the league. He's never had a losing season. And, this year he's in danger of that happening. But, I picked the Steelers to go 9-8 just out of respect for Mike Tomlin because we all know what he represents and how great of a coach he is. But it feels like they're being handicapped by their quarterback, similar to the Browns. Now, the good news for the Steelers is, unlike the Browns are like, oh, man, what do we do with Baker? The Steelers are, this is Ben's last year. Let's go after Aaron Rodgers. Or, hey, let's give Dwayne Haskins a shot if we can't get Aaron Rodgers. Like, they've got options. I don't really know what Cleveland does. Like, I really don't. I don't know what direction they go in. But last night, Ben, 29 for 40, 229, a touchdown, and, a QBR of 38. He was fine. He wasn't bad. He didn't have a bad game, but Big Ben is clearly done. He's completely immobile. He's even the pump fake, like the old Roethlisberger pump fake where he looked like he's going to throw it 65 yards and he tuck it back in. He even lost his grip on that play in which the Seahawks recovered it. They ruled it a fumble. They correctly ruled it a fumble. Like, there's only so far Pittsburgh can go with this guy behind center. It's not a great offensive line. The running game is not what Steelers fans expected it to be. even with Juju out, you still got really good receivers, and your defense is no joke. Pittsburgh defenses are always good. TJ Watt, like I said, has an argument with Trayvon Diggs to be Defensive Player of the Year. John just says Watson to Pittsburgh. That's an interesting one, because I was talking about on Friday, Philly has the assets to go get Deshaun Watson if they want to take that risk, because Philly has, as it stands, 3 picks in the top 8 of next year's draft. Like, Houston would take that. Does Pittsburgh? I mean, what assets do they have? Now, the reports out of Houston have said, look, the Texans are more open to just kind of getting Deshaun Watson off their hands. So maybe they just take whatever Pittsburgh gave them. But that's an interesting one. I didn't think about that. So, I mean, here's the thing. Look, the Steelers have been known to take risks, or at least to have a leash on troubled players. I mean, look at Antonio Brown, look at Le'Veon Bell. So they've done that in the past. So, it'd certainly be a controversial move, again, depending on how the legal stuff goes. But I don't think it's one that's out of the picture. So sure, I could actually see, Deshaun Watson getting traded to Pittsburgh. That'd be an interesting one. But with the Steelers, it's like, God, it feels like they should have won that game by 15, 20 points. I mean, Seattle, running the ball, 144 yards, you'll take that for your Seahawks fan. But, 209 yards from Geno, a touchdown, and of course, the costly fumble there at the end. Grady says, can Pittsburgh make the playoffs in spite of Ben? Also, I really hope this guy just retires. I don't want him to pull an Eli and just absolutely suck his last 3 to 4 years in the league. My gosh, that was painful to watch. That is well said. That is well said. It was painful to watch. It's painful to watch the first 6 games that the Steelers have played, the last 5 or 6 the Steelers played last year. Of course, we all know they started 11-0, and I said, this team is not a contender. Like, last year's Chiefs would have crushed last year's Steelers. I said that at the time the Steelers were 11-0. I just said the Bills would have crushed them, which they ultimately did do. I think it was week 14 that happened. I think Big Ben, honestly, Grady, is kind of pulling an Eli Manning as we speak. I mean, this looks a lot what Eli looked like his last few years or so with the Giants, when it was like, dude, Eli, just hang it up. You ain't got it anymore. And that's the case with Big Ben. I mean, I think a lot of it is, it's kind of culminated in years of, Jay Glazer talked about it, like Big Ben's offseason consists of like a couple of workouts a year, a couple of yoga sessions and drinking a beer. Like that's really, Ben never took the offseason as seriously as his contemporaries, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees. Like he never did. He's still a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. No question. Who's the greatest Steeler quarterback? Is it Big Ben or is it Bradshaw? We can debate about that all day, but he's certainly one of the all-time great Steelers. But I feel like if he had paid more attention and taken care of his body earlier in his career, then he might have lasted longer. But I feel like it's kind of the culmination of that. And the fact that he's 38, 39 years old, he's done. So the Steelers will go however far they'll go. I don't think they'll make the playoffs, just like I said before the season started. They're tied for last in their division for a reason. And, I just think it's funny that in that division, the best quarterback has the best record in that division, Lamar Jackson. The second best quarterback in that division has the second best record, Joe Burrow, and Baker and Big Ben are stuck at the bottom. Like I said, it is a quarterback's league. Like, think about yesterday, for example. I'm going to review some of the games a little later in the show, but let's review them now. The early game, the London game, the early start. Miami, Jacksonville. Tua played really well. Threw for over 300 yards. Like, Tua balled out yesterday, albeit against a bad Jacksonville team. But hey, give credit where credit's due. Tua played really, really good football. It's kind of like the Baker thing. When you see him on the field next to Trevor Lawrence, it's like, oh, man, that guy is different. I mean, that stuff matters. That stuff really matters. John just says Burrow and Chase up next. 1-2 punch. Boy, they have been so far this season. My goodness. By the way, while John is in here, let me go ahead and say this. Tomorrow night at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific, so half an hour past when we normally do our shows, me and John, host of the Fan Perspective podcast, shout out to them, we're going to host a NBA tip-off show. Talk about my predictions for the standings in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. Talk about my predictions for the award winners, MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, the whole bit, Most Improved Player, Coach of the Year, all of it, as well as who I think is going to win the 2022 NBA championship. So it should be fun. NBA season tips off tomorrow night with the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks hosting probably the championship favorite right now, the Brooklyn Nets. And after that game, my Golden State Warriors go to LA to play the Lakers. That line, by the way, for the game I just mentioned, it's ticking down a little bit. Vegas is starting to like Golden State tomorrow. So should be interesting. 2 games without a question. And John's got the basketball and the popcorn emojis. So get your popcorn ready. It's going to be a fun one. 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific time, right where you're watching the show right now. Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter. Be there. It's going to be fun for sure. So looking forward to that tomorrow. Looking forward to the NBA season. October's a crazy month, man. It is a crazy month. And so, again, Jaguars beat the Dolphins. It was so funny. I talked about Brian Flores and how great of a coach he is, and I still think it's ridiculous that people are talking about him on the hot seat. I think it is absurd. Put any coach in that position where there's inconsistency at the quarterback position, which you have with Tua and Jacoby Brissett. No coach would be in a good position with that. And so down the stretch, however, I feel like Urban Meyer, who I've been critical of, somewhat outcoached Brian Flores. In-game decisions, play design, which you got to give a little bit of credit to Schottenheimer, their offensive coordinator. And so, Jacksonville, they broke the streak, the second longest losing streak in the history of the National Football League. 20 games, in case you're wondering, the Buccaneers have the record 26 consecutive losses, when they were wearing those ugly orange uniforms with the white helmets. It was terrible. But the Jaguars were starting to threaten those Buccaneers, and thankfully for them, they won in a game-winning field goal in London across the pond. So that was, good for them. Packers-Bears. So I picked the Packers to win this one. And certainly a very interesting moment in the game. Aaron Rodgers runs for a touchdown and puts the Packers up 10, which pretty much iced the game. Justin Fields struggled. And, I talked about on Friday, one of the reasons I picked Green Bay is simply because Aaron Rodgers has won 9 of his last 10 games against the Bears. Well, now, today, it's 10 of his last 11, and here's what Rodgers had to say about it.
Rodgers snaps it quick. Pressure coming. Scrambles to his right. Pumps and runs. Aaron Rodgers is inside the pylon. Touchdown, Packers. It's Rodgers running for the score. Right on cue, Joe.
I still own you. That was so cool. That was I love it when Aaron's not. I've been critical of Aaron, but Aaron's not a big trash talker, if you will, or at least a big emotional guy. Like usually kind of, I wouldn't say Belichickian, but kind of just, we're on to the next week, and just kind of chill. He let the Bears fans hear, and he later say after the game that was mostly motivated by a Bears fan. He said she was double birding him, so that motivated him to show that gesture. But that was pretty cool. Grady, back to the Jacksonville Dolphins game, said Urban definitely can be a good pro football coach. He just needs to be willing to adapt and learn. Also, thoughts on Cam getting vaccinated. According to NBC Sports, Seattle has had conversations with Cam. That would be really interesting because Cam, could you call Cam? It's very interesting because Cam's 6'5" and Russ is 5'11", but a poor man's Russell Wilson? Maybe more of a poor man's Lamar Jackson because their games are somewhat similar, but you could run some of the plays that they run for Russ for Cam. Yes, I did see that he got vaccinated. Unfortunately for him, if he had done that earlier, he'd probably be the starter in New England right now, and who knows where they'd be. But, I think it's Cam doesn't want to go out like this. But what I said when he got cut is his days of being a starting quarterback in this league they passed us. So maybe Seattle signs him. Maybe a team that needs a quarterback that's trying to contend. Maybe they sign him. But again, I think his days of being a starting quarterback in the National Football League have pretty much passed him. But, it is what it is. Texans Colts yesterday. What else is there to say except the Texans are terrible? And Carson Wentz, to his credit, actually played pretty well. Now, listen, the Colts ran for a $174. Jonathan Taylor, who was my sleeper pick out of last year's NFL draft, I said he's going to be the best running back in the draft last year. I think he's clearly been that. Ran for 145 yards and only 14 carries. So he was running all over that Texans defense. He had an 83-yarder, so that did most of the damage. But Carson Wentz, almost 50% completion percentage, a tick above that. But 223, 2 touchdowns, and had a passer rating of 127. So Carson played well. He's played well the last couple of weeks. So listen, the one reason I thought Carson might be able to work in Indianapolis was pretty obvious because, listen, his head coach now was his offensive coordinator when he almost won the MVP award. So I'm like, listen, if Frank Reich can't fix Carson Wentz's career, then absolutely nobody can. Because Wentz was at the height of his powers with Frank Reich, calling the shots. So, look, the Colts could easily be 3-3 right now if it weren't for, Lamar Jackson doing his thing. And I'll get to Lamar in just a second. But good win by the Colts. Not that surprising of a win. Again, Houston's a bad football team. Probably the worst team in the league along with Jacksonville. Even though they won yesterday, you can maybe throw Miami in that group, which I didn't anticipate. I had the Dolphins getting the playoffs. But you had the Bengals beating the Lions 34-11. Again, I guess, as Grady mentioned in the comments a little earlier, I guess they forgot to bite some kneecaps and not to beat a dead horse. But Jared Goff is now 0-13 without Sean McVay. I mean, I know you're with the Lions, Jared. Could you get one? Just one. Like, could you get one without Sean McVay? But it goes back to what I said for years, even before I did the show, that I didn't see it from Jared Goff because he heard the reports that Sean McVay, not Jared Goff, was calling the audibles. So if Jared Goff got to the line of scrimmage and didn't like what the defense was showing, he'd have to rely on the coach to get out of the play, which that can't happen. If you want to be a great quarterback in this league, you got to be able to do that yourself once you get to year 3, year 4, and so on and so forth. So, Detroit's not a very good football team. I think that's pretty clear. The Rams beat the Giants yesterday. I thought that game would be somewhat closer. The Rams going on the road, 10 o'clock Pacific Coast or Pacific time kickoff for the Rams, and they absolutely dominated. I mean, I don't know why Daniel Jones was in the game as long as he was. I don't know what Joe Judge was trying to prove, but Daniel Jones did not play well. I mean, he was concussed last week, so that's to be expected, especially against a defense like the Rams that is this good. So Rams took care of business. Stafford balled out. Matt Stafford threw for 251, 4 touchdowns, and the 1 interception. So he balled out. He's balled out all season long, and the Rams continue to roll. They're 5-1 now. You got the Chiefs. And the Chiefs surprised me a little bit because I picked them to beat Washington, but I figured to be closer and more high scoring. Because look, as I said last week, when I said, look, the Chiefs are an average team. They're not even good. They're average. In partly because Mahomes was turning the ball over at an alarming rate, and the defense had given up over 30 points in every single one of their games except for one, which was Cleveland, in which they gave up 29. So, close enough. And so yesterday, they only gave up 13 to a Washington football team offense, which, listen, they have their weapons. They have Terry McLaurin. They have Antonio Gibson. They've got a good offensive line, and Taylor Heineke can make plays. So I thought it was an impressive performance from the Chiefs. Then, of course, Sean Taylor got his number retired, and, Washington fans, NFL fans have been calling for that to happen for years. And like I said last week when the John Gruden thing happened, I said that's very interesting that Washington chose now to retire Sean Taylor's number after all this stuff comes out about John Gruden. Because remember, they found the John Gruden emails via an investigation into the Washington football team. You got Jackson Mahomes, Patrick's brother, dancing on Sean Taylor's, memorial area they had in the stadium. Man, Pat's family can drive me crazy sometimes. Jeez. Grady said, will Daniel Jones be the Giants guy next season? I don't think he will. I don't think so. And I think Daniel can play, but it's kind of the Jalen Hurts effect. And I think Daniel Jones is definitely better than Jalen Hurts, but it's the classic backup quarterback. Wow, they made a good throw here. Or, well, that was a good read. Or, wow, what a play. And then a couple plays later, you're like, what are you doing? Or, terrible read. Or, what was he thinking there? So, look, I didn't expect them to beat the Rams yesterday. No reasonable football fan expected the Giants to beat the Rams yesterday. Even Giants fans who certainly astute in the game of football without a question. I don't think so, because I think their mentality going into this year was, here you go, Daniel. Danny Dimes, whatever you want to call him. You got Saquon back, which unfortunately he's hurt again. We added Kenny Golladay in free agency. We added Tony in the draft, who had a big game against Dallas a week ago. You've got Sterling Shepard, who's a really good receiver. Evan Ingram. We added Kyle Rudolph in free agency, who can play at the tight end position. Decent offensive line, a solid defense. It just doesn't work. They're 1-5. They're not going to the playoffs. They're once again going to have a losing season. I don't think so. The question is, where do they go? The only reason I could see the Giants keeping Daniel Jones is, what are other options? I mean, the free agent market for quarterbacks next year is mostly backups, and the draft next year doesn't have a ton of impressive prospects, for all I'm concerned. John said it best. He said Jones is good, not great, and you can't have a franchise quarterback that's good but not great, especially with the roster he has around him. Now, maybe some of it's coaching, because I'm starting to lose my trust in Joe Judge, but who knows? Grady says, I think they'll keep Daniel Jones if they keep David Gettleman. Maybe, or it could be a situation like the Chicago Bears, where the GM and the coach know their jobs are on the line, and they go out and get a young, talented rookie quarterback in Justin Fields. Like David Gettleman, the general manager for the team, that those of you that don't know, he may try to make one more big splash move at the position, to almost a Hail Mary of sorts, to keep himself in the job. But I don't know how much longer Gettleman has there, to be honest with you. He's done good things, and then he's done some bad things, so we'll see. Vikings beat the Panthers. Panthers made a great rally in the fourth quarter. Sam Darnold, led them to have an opportunity to win the game, but he was massively inefficient. I mean, 17 for 41. For those of you that are wondering, that's a 41% completion percentage. So that's not going to work. That's like Tim Tebow bad. Like, that can't happen. 207, a touchdown, an interception. It was a bad interception too. QBR of basically 34 and a passer rating of 55. So below average, way below average. So Darnold didn't play well. Somehow the Panthers still had a chance to win, but Kirk Cousins, if every Vikings game was at 1:00 Eastern time, Kirk Cousins would be in the MVP discussion every year. The 1:00 games, he looks like the best quarterback in the league. And then when it's prime time, it's like, where are you, Kirk? Playoffs, save for one great game against the Saints. Where'd he go? Where'd Captain Kirk go? So you got that. Ravens dominated the Chargers in what was the best matchup going into week 6. Justin Herbert, really struggling against that Ravens defense. Only went 22 for 39, 195 yards, and he did throw a touchdown pass. But Lamar Jackson, ladies and gentlemen, is something special. Lamar Jackson he's different. If you don't, I'll go back. Let's see if I can find the quote from what's his name, John Harbaugh. What he said about people that are doubting Lamar Jackson. He said, quote, if you're looking for your headline here, I think the people that make those statements are kind of whistling in the graveyard just a little bit. It doesn't have any meaning. Anybody who knows X's and O's are rolling their eyes when they hear something like that. And, he's kind of making fun of the notion. This is the year. Remember we heard that? This is the year the NFL figures out Lamar Jackson. You can't figure out something that's great. You can't figure out and stop great, which Lamar Jackson is. Every year, he takes another step. He takes another step in the direction of borderline top 5 quarterback. Because his rookie year, even I was like, I don't know if this is gonna work. Like his passing motion was funky. He was a great athlete, no question. We knew that coming out of Louisville, who retired his number, by the way, number 8. He goes in his second year and comes out of nowhere, has a massive year, wins the MVP unanimously, and loses a playoff game in quite embarrassing fashion against the Titans. Well, he comes back a year later, and while he wasn't his MVP self, he won a playoff game, and it was actually against the Titans, who play tonight. I'll predict the Titans game against the Bills a little later in the show. But you had that. You've got a year later, he's right back in the MVP discussion, and the Ravens are tied for the best record in the AFC with the Buffalo Bills. So, and by the way, this is without all of his running backs and Marcus Peters, his number 1 corner, and the Ravens could easily be 6-0. If they're able to pull that one out in week 1 against the Raiders. So credit to Lamar and credit to the Ravens. He's a special player. Back to the Panthers game. We've got a few comments about that. Grady says Sam Darnold getting a case of the Jets again. John says Captain Kirk. Yeah, I'm calling him that. Shouts to William Shatner going to space. Grady says, get that. He doesn't have McCaffrey, but he still needs to look competent out there. He looks like a deer in headlights without him. Maybe that's it. Because they haven't had Christian McCaffrey since he suffered that hamstring injury in week 3 against Houston. But like you said, Grady, it's you can't be 17 for 41. That's not good. That's eesh. But anyways, I think it's yesterday he broke Dan Marino's record for the most wins by a starting quarterback before turning 25 with 35. So Lamar Jackson's got 35 wins to start his NFL career, and he's not even quite into his mid-20s. Think about that. He's again, like I said this after they beat Kansas City. If you don't believe in Lamar Jackson, I can't help you. I mean, he is special. It's kind of the Giannis effect in the NBA. Like, just because he doesn't look like every other superstar player, LeBron, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, doesn't mean he's not still great. I mean, Giannis is the most dominant player within 5 feet of the basket since the Big Diesel, Shaquille O'Neal himself. I mean, look at the numbers. They speak for themselves. Shaq said that himself. But because he's not a great shooter, which, by the way, might be able to change this season if you've been watching Bucks preseason games. My goodness. So maybe Giannis can shoot now. John says he is who we thought he was. Yeah, using the old, who was the coach? God rest his soul. I'm trying to remember. Not Kevin Green. No, I'm trying. Green. It was Green's last name. Somebody in the comments help me out here. Is the old Vikings coach, and he coached Arizona too. Oh my goodness, I'm going blank. He passed away a few years ago. The coach, Vikings, Cardinals. I'm drawing a blank. I'll get to that in a second. Dennis Green. Thank you, John. John Johnson. Dennis Green. I knew it was Green. So yeah, they are who we thought we were. He's a special player. Lamar is outstanding. What other NFL games we got to react to? Cardinals, Browns, talked about that at length to start the show. And then Raiders, Broncos. This was an interesting one because I picked the Broncos. That was actually my, if I were a betting man, is I had Broncos -4. I thought that was an easy one because I'm like, look, Raiders, they're coming off the Gruden scandal. They just got outplayed by the Chicago Bears at home. I mean, like that, it seems like somewhat of a broken football team. And then you have the Broncos who are at home. Look, their head coach, Vic Fangio, knows his job's on the line. Like, they got to win this game. And the Raiders came in and just manhandled them. I mean, even the final score, 34-24, is not indicative of the kind of game it was. The Raiders were up by as many as 17 points. I mean, Derek Carr threw for 341 yards and a couple of touchdowns. I mean, he was dealing all day. Teddy Bridgewater threw 3 interceptions. The Raiders look good. And I guess it's a case of the Raiders were going to respond in one of two ways. They were going to get blown out, as I thought they would, or they were going to blow somebody out. And the Broncos were one of those teams that were the team that they blew out. So credit to the Raiders with all the crap going on in their organization. I just hate it so bad for the players that they've got to be forced into answering questions for a guy who has no business being in the NFL in John Gruden. They showed up yesterday without a question. Grady Edwards says Dennis Green, underrated coach. He might be the best Viking coach of all time outside of Buddy Grant. He was a great coach. I mean, he got him on the doorstep of the Super Bowl. If it weren't for the Atlanta Falcons having other ideas, Morton Anderson kicking that game-winning field goal. I think it was 1999. Vikings went like 15-1 that season. They had Randy Moss and Chris Carter and Dante Culpepper was their quarterback, and they came up just short against the Falcons that year, and Atlanta went on to lose to Denver in what would be John Elway's final game. So there you go. One more thing. A couple more things I want to get into quickly before I talk about Bills Titans. First of all, let's give a big shout out to Candace Parker, who won her second WNBA championship last night. For those of you that aren't familiar, Candace Parker grew up in Chicago. She plays for, I think, 14 years in the great city of LA with the Sparks, won a championship there. By the way, won an MVP in her rookie season. Think about how hard that is, and she pulled that off. And she wins Defensive Player of the Year last season. And she comes home and goes to her hometown, Chicago, with the Sky, who had never won a championship up to that point. They're the 6th seed in the playoffs. They upset their way through the playoffs, and they win the championship in 4 games. It's a best-of-5 series in the WNBA, and they win in 4 games. Credits Candace Parker, who's a great ambassador for the game of basketball, who's an excellent broadcaster on TNT. She does that on Tuesday nights with Shaq and D Wade. So hats off to her without a question. And hats off to the WNBA as well, because they gave us a great playoffs. And you've seen this year, the ratings have skyrocketed from where they were. And I think you give a lot of credit to their new commissioner. And it's all about marketing these players, putting them out there. You heard, was it Diana Taurasi? I'm trying to remember the one, it might've been Sue Bird that was talking about, hey, help us get more popular. Like we need our league to be on the map. We need to put these women in the spotlight. And, companies like Nike, Adidas have done that. You've got Sabrina Ionescu with Chris Paul and State Farm commercials. Like the WNBA is growing right before our very eyes. That they finished their 25th season. It was a great year, and the team I was rooting for, no question, the Chicago Sky, because Candace Parker is, a ball for life and the greatest basketball player in Tennessee history. Second championship. Hats off to you, Candace. And hey, time to get number 3. Time to get number 3. So props to her. She was very emotional after the game, getting to win a championship for her hometown city. But speaking of the Vols, and I tried to not talk about Tennessee as much as possible, at least Tennessee football, because they're a disgrace to the sport, frankly. And I'm a Tennessee fan. The other night, they played Ole Miss, and they lost that game. It was a very entertaining football game. Went down to the wire. Actually came down to the very last play of the game. And I don't know what Joe Milton was thinking right there, running out of bounds when he could have thrown it in the end zone. Only Tennessee fans and Ole Miss fans know what I'm talking about. The bottom line is Tennessee, they're down. It's like a 4th and 20-something. Very similar to the third down that the Cowboys had yesterday, if you can imagine that. Tennessee had like a 4th and 24, and they got about 23 and a half of that back. The quarterback, Hendon Hooker, threw a pass that got the ball just short of the first down and 4th down inside of a minute left, which gave Ole Miss possession. And seemingly, at least that time, lost the game for Tennessee. And then all hell broke loose. Tennessee fans did what Tennessee fans have done since I've watched games at Neyland Stadium. It's one of the reasons I've stopped going to games at Neyland Stadium. is they littered the field with alcohol, with water bottles, with pizza boxes. Heck, there was even mustard. Who brings mustard to a game? Mustard was on the field. Lane Kiffin didn't catch one. There was a golf ball thrown at Lane Kiffin. Again, why are you bringing a golf ball to a football game? But it didn't surprise me. I posted about it on social media. It didn't surprise me. It's a disgrace. Tennessee fans are, as I said in my tweet the other night, one of the most annoying, one of the most obnoxious. They're very much like Cleveland Browns fans. And so that's why I thought it was very interesting, because 20 years ago, the Browns had a very similar scenario. Fans are throwing stuff on the field, and the league just said, okay, we're calling the game. That's it. No more football. They didn't do that in the Tennessee Ole Miss game. But I got to say this. I'm kind of mad at the SEC for what they did to Tennessee. Because according to Chris Lowe of ESPN, the SEC has fined Tennessee $250K for the fan behavior. And here's why I'm mad at that. Because that's the same amount of money that schools get fined when, say, you got an upset win or a big win. Think about Texas A&M. They upset the number one team in the country, Alabama, last weekend. I mean, it was an unbelievable football game. Texas A&M wins on a game-winning field goal, and the fans stormed the field. Well, Texas A&M got fined $250K, which I think is bogus. You're fining Tennessee fans the same for their disgusting, nauseating behavior as A&M fans or even Iowa fans for storming the field, for rushing the field after a big win. Come on, guys. Like, that's, you got to be harsher than that. But, you know, this is why I try to disassociate myself from Tennessee fans as much as possible, is because they have an idea of the program that, simply put, is not realistic. Tennessee fans are the very reason that the program is in the position that it is now, which is middle of the pack at best. Because 2008, after an appearance in the SEC championship game, Tennessee goes like 5-7. It was a very disappointing season, and the fans pressured the athletic program to fire Philip Fulmer. Philip Fulmer, who is now a college football Hall of Famer, and deservedly so, coached 16 years, or 17 years, I think it was, with Tennessee, and they fired him. And since then, they've had Lane Kiffin, they've had Derek Dooley, they've had Butch Jones. Don't get me started on Butch Jones. They had Jeremy Pruitt, who I was highly critical of, and now they have Josh Heupel, who I actually kind of like. I liked the hire considering the scandal that they were coming off of. Grady says, was it that bad? Didn't realize that. Who started it? I mean, I don't know who started it. And look, I'm not going to say, oh, all of Neyland Stadium should be just absolutely condemned. No. There were people at that game that were just as disgusted as I was, as everybody watching that game was. But Grady, it was, watching it live, it was honestly sickening. Because you've got a fan base that if they don't get their way, they lose. It's like a temper tantrum. It's like a toddler. And again, trust me, I went, one of the biggest downfalls of Neyland Stadium is, I'm gonna keep it real here, is when they start selling alcohol. Now, I'm not anti-alcohol. I'm not one of those people who thinks, oh, if you drink alcohol, you're the worst person. No. But they announced they were selling alcohol at Neyland Stadium, and I was like, oh no, yes, you're selling alcohol to these people. Sure enough, first game Neyland Stadium sells alcohol. It was actually a game against BYU. Zach Wilson played that game. Zach Wilson, new starting quarterback, new, hopefully for the Jets, franchise quarterback. And I was at that game, and it was an absolute mess. People were getting kicked out of the stadium for, harassing fans. You had some college dorks that were, had too much to drink. I don't even know if they were of age yet. You had grown adults who were getting carted out of the stadium because they drunk too much. I mean, it was a mess. The fan behavior got worse. And like I said, Tennessee fans are the reason that Tennessee's football program is where it is right now. It's that simple. Unrealistic expectations. They don't they don't really know football. If we're gonna continue to keep it real here, they're the worst. And so, but again, just like I talked about with Candace Parker, I got to compartmentalize that and say, you know what? I'm a Tennessee fan. I'm a fan of the program. I'm not a fan of the fans. Like, you got to remember that. I'm a Cowboys fan. I'm a fan of the Cowboys, not the fans. Those of you out there, you're a fan of your team. You're not a fan of the fans. So try to keep that. I try to keep that in perspective. But when it happened, obviously I was disgusted, but I wasn't surprised. I mean, come on. What wasn't surprised? I mean, there were poor kids down there that weren't doing anything wrong, that were getting hit in the head with some of the objects they were throwing in the field. It was a pretty disgusting scene. So I got to criticize the SEC for only handing out that kind of punishment to the program. And so, yeah, that's my thoughts. All right, last topic of the day. Let's end on a good note. Monday Night Football tonight. It's a really good one. Tennessee Titans against the Buffalo Bills. Monday Night Football on ESPN. And you got two teams that are playoff hopefuls. You've got a team in Buffalo that's got Super Bowl aspirations. Real quick, I'll go back to Grady. He says, y'all beat my Gamecocks. I'll give you that. Also, we are a bowl game bound, hopefully. I watched, by the way, Grady, I watched South Carolina's because it was right before Tennessee played. I watched South Carolina, the South Carolina Vanderbilt ending. It was crazy. You got, they bring in, for those of you who don't know, South Carolina has a backup quarterback on their roster who I think was like a grad assistant, but he had 1 year of eligibility left. Forgive me if I'm messing up or butchering the story, but they put him in. They're down 3 in the fourth quarter, or sorry, they're down. Was it 6? They're down 6 in the fourth quarter, 20-14. I hope I'm getting that right. Was that the score? I think it was. Let me check real quick because I don't want to mess this up because it was such a great finish. Let's see, SEC. Yeah, 20-14. Vanderbilt had the lead at South Carolina. They bring this kid in who's the backup quarterback who, again, has not thrown a pass all game, who's a former grad assistant, and he leads the Gamecocks to a long, I think it was a 75-yard drive, won the game 21-20. It was a great, great scene. And look, I'll say this. I think South Carolina's going in the right direction. You got Frank Beamer's son is the head coach of the team, the great Frank Beamer, who was, the Hokies coach for years. Listen, South Carolina's going in the right direction. I'll give you that. But yes, we did kick y'all's butts a couple weeks ago when we were wearing those nice black uniforms. Those were cool. So back to Buffalo and Tennessee, the Titans, obviously. This is a tough one because Tennessee's defense has completely flipped. They've been really good this season. And that was my number one concern going into the season, why I didn't have them winning the AFC South over Indianapolis, was because I felt like Indianapolis was more of a complete football team. And they still may be, who knows? But the offense was never the concern. You got Ryan Tannehill, who's a Pro Bowl quarterback. Derrick Henry's the best back in all football. You got Julio Jones and A.J. Brown on the outside. Got a pretty good offensive line. Defensively was where I was concerned. But thus far, they played well. But this is a different animal in the Buffalo Bills. This is the team I predicted to get to the Super Bowl and play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Josh Allen is playing at an MVP level. By tomorrow, we'll probably be talking about in the MVP discussion, Kyler, Dak, Brady, Lamar, and Josh Allen. Like, it's going to be those 5 with, Justin Herbert with certainly an opportunity as well. We got a long way to go. But as of right now, the line for this game, the Vegas line for this game is Buffalo on the road, -6. And so let's put up the final score. I'm going to take the Buffalo Bills to win pretty easily, 42-23. I just think this team is on a different level than everybody else in the conference, outside of maybe Baltimore. Because this is a squad that has an elite quarterback, great weapons on the outside, great defense, great coach. Tennessee is pretty good in those areas. I think Mike Vrabel's an excellent coach. Ryan Tannehill's a very good quarterback. Derrick Henry's a beast, best back in football, as I mentioned. Receiving core is top 10 in the league. Defense has rebounded from last year. But you're going to see tonight, I think you're going to see the difference between a playoff team and a Super Bowl team. It's like I talked about earlier with quarterbacks. There's levels to this. So I'm going to take the Bills to win this game and cover the spread easily, 42-23, and hopefully finish my week 12-4. I think I'm 12-4 this week on my predictions for week 6. So good week. So with that is all the time we have for tonight's show. We appreciate everybody stopping by. Let's go Red Sox. Let's beat Houston tonight. Beat those cheaters and go up 2-1 in the ALCS. Again, you got Buffalo and Tennessee tonight. Braves got a 2-0 lead on the Dodgers. Didn't even have time to get to that. They won on 2 walk-offs back-to-back nights. So crazy stuff. Catch me and John Rivera from the Fan Perspective Podcast tomorrow night at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific time, right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter. NBA tip-off show. Going to talk about everything basketball. We're talking standings. We're talking award winners. We're talking storylines. And we're talking who's going to win the 2022 NBA championship. So can't wait. John, see you there tomorrow night. Hope everybody has a great evening. Continue to stay safe. God bless you all. Peace out.